This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hey, Adam Murray here, one half of the NBA team. Along with my co-host Andrew Riche. This is part 7 of our Gone Fishin' series. As always, hope you enjoy it, and thanks for listening.
44 points in his hip pocket and 7 assists. Bingo! New career high for Sweet Lou. 47 points. A bus ride to Sacramento will be a pleasant one. 30 seconds to go. Lou says, why not? Bingo! His first 50-point game in his career.
Adam, the Clip Show is back in session with Doc Rivers. He got his extension, which I guess just sort of speaks to the fact that they just want to keep a little bit of consistency, because outside of, Rivers and Austin Rivers being there for the squad, there's just a lot of up and down and throwing around going on with the Clippers organization.
They gave him the deal, but he's not in charge. He would never have. He tried desperately to keep that group together. He would not have traded Blake Griffin for anything.
Is that sort of like what you would call a sign of resignation? Not resigning as a coach, but like almost like, yeah, I'll do this. I'll do this because I know that nobody else is going to want me to have autonomy.
Yeah, basically. You put all your money in Gallinari, and then all of a sudden he comes up with a buttocks injury, and it's just like, well, that says it all right there.
That was a bad signing. I mean, he's a really good scorer, but he's about to reach 30 years old. You got him for $20 million plus salary for the next 3 seasons, and I don't know if he can get. I don't know how much better he can really be than what he is now. That was one of the worst signings of last year, no doubt about it.
Patrick Beverley, you needed a great backup point guard. He gets injured super early. Milos Teodosic, I was high on coming out of Europe, gets injured early.
Fantastic passer.
The only problem is you had Lou Williams, who just decided to play out of his mind and be like NBA Jam, just scoring 50 every night.
Yeah, I mean, his January was just lethal. Like, I mean, a lot of people threw shade at when Chris Paul – that infamous Clippers-Rockets game where the Clippers won and Lou Williams went off, and then Austin Rivers and Blake Griffin were talking trash to Chris Paul and James Harden, and supposedly Paul was going through this sideways hallway to try to get around security to get to the Clippers locker room to go after Austin. That one and the Kawhi Leonard players only meeting were like the 2 most entertaining things I remember about NBA Twitter this year. But
as opposed to the NBA Twitter with the Philadelphia.
Oh God. Oh well,
that's a whole different.
I'm not touching that.
Okay, well, back to the Clippers.
No, but the long story short there is that like Chris Paul made the comment, oh yeah, Lou Williams is their best player, but they felt like he was throwing shade at Blake Griffin when Blake was still with the Clippers. I mean, this is how much stuff's going on since the beginning of the season. Like Blake Griffin got traded to the Pistons, but it's just been a bit of a topsy-turvy year for them.
We had said this at the beginning of the year. It was a good thing they have a bench. They've never had a bench before. The problem is Doc doesn't play young people at all. He was sort of forced to. And then we said, if Austin Rivers is your starting anything, your team's in trouble. And then it was like November, starting as Austin Rivers. It's not his fault. He's Doc Rivers. It's not his fault. He was given, $11 million a year or something?
He's got a player option of $12.6 million.
Yeah, he's not going to turn that down. And nobody told him, no, you should take less money. Of course he's going to take it. It's just... he's a decent player. It's just because of who he is, he gets ridiculed more. But again, if he's playing, your starters are all gone, and then you're in trouble. And you have Avery Bradley, who I guess he went into surgery immediately upon going there.
He only played 6 games. That's a really tough situation because for Bradley, his stock could have been higher when he was in Boston, but his stock couldn't be lower since he was in Detroit and Los Angeles. So like there's a chance for for Bradley that he'll just stick around or maybe sign a 1-year, $12 million deal and just try to prove his worth and then go out free agency again. The other part of that Detroit trade was for them, for the most part, the biggest one was Tobias Harris. He's there till the end of next year. He actually scored really Tobias Harris is he's like the Lou Williams of big guys. Like he just seems to be able to score and get buckets.
He's just undersized, and that's sort of the problem. If you play him at the 4, well, now he's sort of too small for that. And the big issue is what do you do with Jordan?
Yeah, well, he's got a player option at $24 million. Now, $24 million is nothing to sniff at, but I'm sure if he opts out, he could get just about the same, if not more.
And it's, do you want him back? And is it time to break up the band? And
he averages $15 million, 15 rebounds a game.
He averages $15 million a game.
You remember that? You remember that old Timofey Mozgov snafu with the stat where they said that he had 250 rebounds in a game? I almost did that. But he's still. I mean, he's got the. It's almost like with Jordan, everything's the same. Great rebounder, decent shot blocker, great field goal percentage, can't make a free throw to save his life, a sidekick. That's kind of been Jordan's MO forever. But if he opts in, then is that Jordan basically saying, yeah, I'm gonna try to lead the way here now that Blake is gone? Because everybody's known that or assumed that Jordan had a fairly close relationship with Paul and with Griffin, and now they're both gone.
Yeah, it's a weird time for the Clippers, and it's the 1-year thing where everybody sort of has to prove themselves. They've never had money; they've always been hard capped, and same thing again this coming year. So you just sort of have to go with what you have and hope it works.
Yeah, and they got a lot of guys that, like you were just talking about, that they just can't move just out of circumstance. Harris is going to be back because he's got some value. Lou Williams signed an extension, and it was I would call it a cap friendly deal, to say the least. Rivers is going to opt in. Gallinari's not going anywhere. Beverly has a team option at $5 million. He's going to be, the team option is going to be enacted there. And then they got some rookies that are sort of in the fold, like Sindarius Thornwell, Jawan Evans, Sam Decker, who's been riddled with injuries in his career. And then they had a lot of G League guys that they had to play more minutes than they expected, like Tyrone Wallace, C.J. Williams, Jameel Wilson, guys like that. The one that's interesting is Montrezl Harrell, because I feel like that's a guy that might get overpaid in the open market.
Well, you were high on him, waiting for him to do something, and I don't know, I'm still sort of waiting for him to do something. So.
He's got crazy high field goal percentage, so people will think that he might be able to boost PER. It's kind of like Solomon. It would be the same, like sort of sideways thinking that got Solomon Hill a big contract with New Orleans, of like, oh, if he played more minutes, maybe his PER would go up because of his field goal percentage.
Well, and you have a good 10 game stretch, and all of a sudden that turns into something.
Exactly, that kind of thing. Wesley Johnson's just going to play there forever. I've already given up.
He's still in the league, so more power to him.
When he's not tripping, trying to guard James Harden. I mean, he'll be remembered. That's what everyone's going to remember him for. Outside of that, it's hard to really describe the team this year. They weren't shooting a lot of threes. They didn't have a lot of assists. You can thank Austin Rivers for that one. But offensively, they were really good. They were in the top 10. They got a lot of free throws. They played pretty fast. And defensively, they had some issues. You could put that a lot on not having Beverly around. Teodosic is a bit of a bulldog on defense too sometimes.
Well, yeah, he is.
He has a reputation for being a bad defender.
But the thing is, they just all need to stay healthy. And there's a second thing which we haven't discussed, which I think we could wrap up at this point. You have 2 picks. You have the 12th and the 13th pick. They need to hit on something, because who was their pick last year? Jawan Evans. We liked him but didn't get in the court. 2 years ago, who was it? It was from North Carolina.
Reggie Bullock.
No, he wasn't good. He's no longer on the team.
Hold on. Bryce Johnson.
There we go. Bryce Johnson, and then Diamond Stone was their other pick, who's also no longer on the team.
That was a Doc thing. Now Doc's not running the office anymore.
You got 2 picks, 12 and 13. You need to do something for the future.
Yeah. The other thing is you can probably let Harold go for the fact that you have Boban Marjanovic, who I didn't mention. But the problem is, like, what's Boban's ceiling? Seriously.
He is going to give you his 12 minutes, and Detroit said we're going to give you $6 million. Nobody knows why.
And he'll have those like 2 or 3 games where he gets like 18 rebounds, and you don't know why. You know. Can you take the 12 and 13 and put it together and try to get to the top 10?
You could, or just the Clippers are just always whatever they do will be the wrong choice.
I would like for them to make that maneuver, because that means I know that somebody in that front office really likes a draft pick that they see, and that might give them a little bit of confidence of we like our future type of thing. Because the thing is, like, their cap situation and the expirings, they're all over the place. I know a lot of it is 2019, but outside of that, like, you know, you got so many decisions that have to be made, and it's almost on a year-to-year basis between Jordan, between, you know, Beverly, Austin Rivers, and Tobias Harris. Like, you got so much stuff out there.
You have so much stuff, so many pieces, but is any of them really good, or are they just sort of like a better Denver Nuggets? You have people, but you're not going to get over the hump.
I'll say this, at the end of the year, they were scrappy. Like, they were fighting for that last playoff spot. They just fell a little bit short.
DeRozan has 25 and a half. DeMar DeRozan, 6 to go, got all the way to the bucket. Dominant dynamite. Watch this. He just took that ball from the opposite foul line, right down the middle of the court, and he goes up strong, two-handed jam dunk, and he gets fouled. And one. What a finish. That's what an all-star looks like, folks.
The Toronto Raptors, the number one team, the number one seed in the East, Adam Murray, did not end that way. And now they are starting off this offseason, this gone fishing with no coach. So what do the Raptors do now?
No coach, just a depressed fan base, completely just shell-shocked of how do you go from being the, you know, in the regular season looking at a legit championship contender to LeBron just mops the floor with you. And, you know, he just got in their heads and they couldn't collectively overcome that, which is a shame.
Let me ask you this. Like, I know that you've had your criticism of Dwayne Casey with his inability to, you know, kind of do matching up in the playoffs, you know, not being a great playoff coach, I guess is a better way of saying it. But what has seemed to make the Toronto Raptors sort of like fall into this like paper mache where it just seems like the moment they hit adversity, they crumble into a million pieces?
They are the water boy. And Bobby Boucher hasn't tuned him out yet and hasn't been hypnotized. You know, he's still, you know, shell shocked. He hasn't gotten them in. That's what the same thing happens to Toronto. The regular season, they have all new plays. You have DeRozan, who really stepped up his game. He
did. He had an MVP caliber year.
He went to a new level, and all of a sudden, just, you know, they just fall apart, and then back to the same lack of switching. We're just gonna do fadeaway shots. We don't know what we're doing. You know, Valanciunas, well, he's horrible, but he looks like he's the best player on the court at times. And yeah, he's sometimes a defensive liability, but the offensive mismatch. No, we're just gonna abandon him, and we'll throw in, you know, OG Anunoby. Well, he's good for rookie, but no, he's not your savior. And you go with Ibaka, hoping he could keep it. And, you know, he's sort of starting to lose a step. And, you know, Lowry, he's playing, but he's not happy. He only got 3 years because he knows his time is coming to an end soon.
Let me say this with Ibaka. I thought Ibaka did fit well with Toronto. I thought in the regular season it seemed like, yeah, it seems like he nudges in nicely in the front court with Jonas Valanciunas, and then Jakob Poeltl is just sort of like a serviceable, young and learning backup behind Valanciunas. Like, and then you got Siakam, who sort of can switch between the 3, the 4, and the 5, depending on how small you want to play. The thing that was interesting was this with Toronto, and in particular their playoff bugaboos, is that their bench scoring and their bench squad was considered by most the best in the league. You know, with the depth that they had with Anunoby starting a lot of games, and then, you know, I wouldn't call it the Keith Bogans role, because he played way more than like 15 or 16 minutes in a game, but he was learning. Siakam was, learning. Norman Powell got an extension, but he still played fairly well. And Fred VanVleet is one of the finalists for the Sixth Man of the Year. He had a really, really good year. So they were able to get all that production out of their bench. But then when outside of that one game where the elimination game with the Wizards, where the bench just completely raided the Wizards in the fourth quarter to finish off the Wizards, outside of that, in the Cleveland series, they just disappeared.
Well, the Wizards beat themselves by just being. They didn't look like a cohesive unit. They wanted to be there the whole entire time. But, again, it's just they're in their heads. There's nothing they could do. Every mistake was the wrong one. And there's nothing you could do about that one. It's a mental thing. All you can do is, like Golden State did, you change the coach, you fire Casey, you bring in somebody else. Maybe he could get you to the promised land. All you needed was just a different philosophy.
And Masai Ujiri's no dummy. He made this decision to fire Casey. There was a word about, arguments between the two during the Cleveland series. So you could tell there was a little bit of strife and disagreement, but there was some calculation to this by Ujiri. I know that there's been a long time. As we even talk about this, they're still looking into coaches, but the thing is I'm sure there's a little bit of calculation there. There's a little bit of Masai saying, I've got a plan for this. I just can't think that Masai is just completely had gotten to a point where he's been this successful with Toronto after leaving Denver, and he's just going to let it all fall apart like that.
He's butted up against the wall as well. He can't make roster moves, so it'll have to be. They're
salary strapped to the furthest end of the world.
You have no pick because you gave it away to get rid of DeMar Carroll, and
if you re-sign Fred VanVleet, then you have no money to keep DeLon Wright.
It has to be, which you'd be like, okay, that's fine because we know you and him, but it has to be VanVleet or Powell. You can't keep both.
That's true. I don't know if Powell reaches $10 million. I'm sure with 8% increases over the year, he eventually will. He's at $9.3 million the following season. So he's 24 years old. He's pretty young. Maybe you can get someone to bite on it.
Well, he was young. You gave him that deal. It's like, well, how much is he worth? I guess he's kind of a 4-year, $40 million guy.
But is he a tradable asset? And the answer is yes.
He's a tradable asset, but he hasn't really done anything last year. He never took another step, which we all expected him to. And in days where you just aren't doing it, that's not a good sign.
Who do you like between Siakam and Anunoby? It felt like they were sort of competing for the same spot.
Well, they shouldn't because, Siakam's a big man, so he can't.
But he's a big that sort of kind of roams and plays bigger.
He roams, but Anunoby is a guard, and they can't really cross over. So it's one of those. Well, if you put both of them on, you have no shooting.
Yeah, the one we didn't bring up is C.J. Miles. He fit okay. He's just one of those cagey veteran types who can shoot threes. The problem is he's absolutely peaked in value. Whatever you see, you're not going to get better than what you see now.
Well, he was the best they could do because they got no money, so I forget who they traded for him, but
they flipped him back to Indiana for oh man, I'm blanking on this. Who was the guy that they immediately trade? They basically did a sign and trade. Oh, Corey Joseph.
Oh yeah, Corey Joseph.
Corey Joseph.
But it was the best they could do. And you lost Terrence Ross, who, a couple of years ago was supposed to be part of your future, and then all of a sudden he just became mediocre. And Toronto just has mental problems. They just need to get over it. They can easily be the number one team next year again.
And that's the funny thing because they were the number one seed in the East. When you look at their team stats, it all looks great. They were top 10 in everything but 3-point percentage and steals. For some reason they weren't a fast team, but the thing is with all that, that's fine. But then when you get there's just it feels like a cop out because you're sort of it's like you're trying to escape all of the stats to just talk about generalities. But when you get to the playoffs with the Raptors, it just everything changes. And I don't know if a new coach with a looser mindset or maybe a little bit of a different type of strategy of, we're going to go to DeRozan more, or we're going to run more pick and roll with Lowry down the stretch more, or we're going to get rid of this Lowry plus bench stuff and just go with DeRozan and Lowry and just try to whack people early in games to take them out of it. Like, I don't know if there's going to be a new strategy going forward that might ease up on that tension, but something's got to get done or they're going to crumble. And I don't mean crumble in the playoffs. I mean burn it down. Like, the team's going to fall apart.
That's pretty much where they're at right now. You just have to get out of your own way, which they can't right now. And no matter how much, we could talk for hours about what's wrong with Toronto, but in the end, it's just them. They can't get over that hump. And all I can say is maybe this new coach, and credit to Ujiri for thinking outside of the box. Don't go for that NBA retread. Think of something different that hasn't been done. You sort of have to swing for the fences at this time. You can't have a safe pick because I don't want to say this window is super short, but it's.
I think next year is it, because after that, Lowry's salary will be toxic, and the Raptors will be desperately trying to find someone to buy it off of him.
Yeah, well, he'll be in the third year of an expiring contract, but you have that, and their team has just gotten too old, so it's not the best of positions. But as far as a new coach coming in, wow, you're taking the number one seed? Okay.
It's a great, I sort of gave a lot of doom and gloom in my little rant there, but, it's a really good team. I mean, they were 59-23, for God's sakes. They only lost 7 games at home before the Cleveland series. They weren't doing badly. They're doing all right. Small potato stuff here. Bebe Nogueira, restricted free agent. Do you think they'll just be able to get him on the tender, or do you think he'll be back?
Probably not.
Malachi Richardson, will he be back?
Probably not.
I mean, the only reason I bring up Malachi is because the guy that they traded to get Malachi was our friend Bruno. The Bruno Caboclo era is over.
I know, and that saddens.
He's no longer 2 years away from being 2 years away. If he was 2 years away from being 2 years away, and that was 4 years ago, then he should be here by now.
He should be here, and it should be, even if he isn't here, he should be like a high first-round pick. Where would you draft him now? And he's still on the he couldn't even get minutes in Sacramento.
Is Jonas Valanciunas one of the two best Eastern Conference big men is one of the two best big men in the Eastern Conference?
What, him and Drummond and Whiteside? None of whom could play in the crunch time?
Love's okay.
But Love's not a traditional big man.
He's not, but he banged pretty good inside against Valanciunas in that playoff series.
Well, everybody just had their way. All of Cleveland kind of did so.
I mean, the Ibaka Valanciunas thing, the weird thing is that when you watch it, it seems like it's a good fit, these two bruising bigs, but defensively, I think you already talked about it. Ibaka's lost the special sauce. He just doesn't have that anymore. And Valanciunas, he really, when he's getting those points and rebounds, he can really ramp them up, get a 20 rebound game, but it feels like hollow stats sometimes.
They just need some therapy time.
Yeah, they need to make what they accomplish on the score sheet, they need to make it matter. That's my problem with Toronto. And I hope a new coach can do it, but time is running out.
Westbrook pops out. Butler is on him. Anthony for three. Got it! Thunder on the high side!
And Minnesota has no timeouts. So smart play here.
Wiggins spots up for a deep three. He's got it! He scores it at the buzzer to give the Timberwolves the victory.
All right, Adam, we're going to be talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm sort of off fumes here. So are we going to be yelling timber for Minnesota because of all these rumors that we're hearing about Karl Anthony Towns? Because that's the new sexy story that's going on right now. Maybe I'm a victim of recency bias, but do you feel like there's some smoke to that fire?
Well, it's.
I mean, we can use that as the big picture to talk about where that may have come from. Where would that uneasiness with Karl Towns come from with Minnesota? What may have what's causing all of this?
I think it would have to be Thibodeau. Just playing your starters 40 minutes, having no bench, having no, being every game matters, so everybody's done by the end.
And that's a good point. By the end of the year, you feel like you've given everything you've had, and you fall way short. And it makes you feel like, what was this for?
You bring in all your Chicago players Like, Wiggins almost has an untradeable contract because Butler has ruined him. Because they're the same player, and you can't play the same player. And so Jimmy Butler has canceled out Andrew Wiggins.
And the thing that makes it that interesting is that, they had the whole. I mean, listen, Andrew Wiggins was a rookie of the year. He was a number one pick. He seemed to have ascending value going into those extension negotiations. But here's the thing: that extension was agreed to well after they got Butler. They did this very well, knowing like we kind of have the same type of player here.
Yeah, but they hadn't played. You had him, but you didn't know how it would turn out. Well, we sort of figured it out. It's like, well, neither can shoot threes and don't have space.
A lot of people compared that to Paul and Harden. The difference is guards in today's league. You can't have enough. You can have 5 guards in the league now and get away with it. With wings, I mean, you really need one to have the space in mid range to go to work. Having 2 out there is a bit much. Now Butler made it work because he's. Let's be serious. Butler's just at a higher level than Wiggins is at. Wiggins hasn't hit that level yet. He hasn't broken the glass ceiling.
No, he hasn't in Towns. He's probably just he's. I guess I'd say more of a tired, frustrated, as opposed to just an angry, frustrated at this point. But of course, when there's blood in the water, everybody's going to swim around trying to get him. But the thing is, Minnesota can't do anything to make this team better.
Yeah, well, in terms of cap, they're stuck like that. Like they're projected around 116 million. That's like right at the tax. Like there's nothing you can do there. You got Taj Gibson for 1 more year. Jamal Crawford doesn't make much. The big deal there, or the big hang up that for every team seems to have, where it's like, oh, that was a big mistake. This is why our cap is sort of in hell. Is Gorgie Jang's salary? That's the big one.
Yeah, but he's not terrible at his position, and he's not really making a ton.
But you have him signed through 2021. That's the problem.
Yeah, but he was, again, Anthony, he's Towns Insurance. You need some sort of big man. And the problem with them is, like I said, you can't – all they have money left are for veteran minimums. You can't get a veteran minimum if they don't – what's the point of playing on this team if I'm not going to get off the bench?
They were so desperate that they let Shabazz Muhammad walk so that they could bring in Derrick Rose.
Yeah,
and Derrick Rose didn't do anything.
He didn't do anything, and they're like, well, we want him, Thibodeau's like, we want him back. It's like, well, what are you doing? The Bulls didn't work. Why are you trying to do it again? Why are you alienating the thing you had? All the hope that we had for them now, it's sort of like, I don't want to say it's, the waters are getting a little muddy, but you can't do anything if, Jeff Teague goes out, all of a sudden Tyus Jones is playing 35 minutes. The second Teague comes back, Tyus Jones is back to playing 14 minutes. It just shows like your inflexibility.
That's a good point. Like some of the fans will lash out and say, well, Justin Patton had a broken foot and he only played 1 game. Well, here's the thing. Was Justin Patton going to get any playing time under Thibodeau? Judging by the methods, no. The only way he would have been if Karl Towns just like fell down to a horrific injury. Then you may have seen Justin Patton. But that's just one example. That like the other ones are like Aaron Brooks, a Chicago Bulls former Thibodeau guy. That one just kind of didn't make sense. Crawford, he didn't really fit that well, if you ask me.
No, he was supposed to be their big sign. They got him in that 3-way trade, or they picked him up once Atlanta cut him. But he didn't fit at all, and just it doesn't help your team if you make a lateral move on point guard for a shooter who's not as good as a passer. You have 2 guys who can't shoot on the wings, and you have Towns. It's just like, well, this team is here. You're good, but you're not great, and we don't see you becoming great.
Their free agency is not that enticing because a lot of them are guys that are either already gone or not really that important, except for Nemanja Bjelica, because he was a guy that actually got 21 starts and a decent amount of playing time when Butler was out, and they would go kind of with a bigger lineup. But I believe his free agency is unrestricted. So what's going to happen here with Bjelica?
I don't know whether he's just been injured a lot, and there's always that we thought he had potential, but we don't know who he is still.
Yeah, 7 points, 4 rebounds, 1.3 assists, almost 0.7 steals. Like, a decent player. chippy, seemingly a Thibodeau guy. The problem is, Thibodeau's he's in the same role that Stan Van Gundy had previously in Detroit. Like, he is the president / general manager or whatever, and the head coach. It all ends with him. But where's that axe gonna fall? Because that I'm not trying to harp back on the town stuff, but that is very, very worrying.
It's very worrying that the team doesn't have a future. For somebody who's so good, you sort of went all in now, and we don't know if you can get over that hump because your coach is beating you down.
Well, not only that, he sort of locked in this roster, with Teague, with Wiggins' extension, with Taj Gibson for 2 years, and you get to the first round, you lose pretty convincingly to the Rockets in 5 games, and you're just kind of like sitting there thinking, that's it? This is what we are? This is what we're going to be? And that's a deflating feeling. So I sort of understand.
It's a deflating feeling because, they're going to make the playoffs. They'll probably be a 4 seed. Well, they made the playoffs, but they barely made it. This wasn't supposed to happen.
And defensively, they were kind of a mess. And that blame needs to go on Thibodeau a little bit.
Who's a defensive coach. So it doesn't make sense. Just a quick final question. How can Minnesota possibly improve their roster?
They need a 3-point shooter in the draft with the 20th pick. Or they need to sign one. But they don't have the money to do it. They would have to get somebody for chump change.
And that's the thing, is how many of those are really available?
There's not many. That's the problem. If you want a specialist, we keep bringing him up, JJ Redick, because he's a free agent. JJ Redick ain't coming cheap, buddy. You're gonna have to find a Brady Heslip or a Joe Ingles, one of these guys from overseas that just kind of comes out of nowhere and gives you something. That's the problem with Minnesota, is that they just don't have a lot of room to make moves, especially with that Wiggins contract and the Jeff Teague contract.
And then Towns has a contract coming soon. It's amazing how things have changed in Minnesota so fast.
But you say that about Towns, though. I'm not trying to say Towns doesn't deserve this money. The other problem too is that you can get the Supermax with that percent of the cap if you're traded before your rookie deal is up. So a lot of people are saying, "Oh, Towns is trying to get out now so that he can still get the Supermax with a different team."
Yeah, but the thing about Towns is, don't forget, he's also a young player, and a lot of these comments will be changed with maturity. But again, things aren't as rosy as we thought in Minnesota as they were.
Nope. And that's going to be doing it for this episode. I'm glad for everybody listening to it. Still got a little bit left to go. Adam, do you have anything for us before we get out of Dodge?
Hey, thanks for listening to this part. Check out the other parts. They're all equally as good.
On behalf of Adam Murray, this is Andrew Riche. We'll see you again.